Rock and roll!
Don't even think about anybody coming for you.
Seen before. What the hell on?
Get that whore out of my house.
She's not a whore, Mother.
I said get rid of her. Or do I have to do it myself?
No, Mother. I'll get rid of her.
Kill her.
Kill her? I can't. No. No, I can't.
All right. Then I'll do it for you.
I should have killed you in my womb. I was fine until I gave birth to you. You caused a lot of damage. Because of you, my bladder's damaged. I can't hold my water. That's why I'm always running to the toilet. Did you know that?
Mother! Oh, God, Mother! Blood! Blood!
Are you saying you killed your mother, Ed?
Oh, I've killed before. And now I'm going to have to do it again.
Hi, I'm Barbara Crampton from Chopping Mall, and you're listening to The Hysteria Continues.
And indeed you are. Welcome back to a very special episode of The Hysteria Continues, because we are 14 years old, and not just Erik's mental age. This is the 14th year. This is our 14th birthday episode. So 14 years ago, not quite today, but certainly around then, we were tentatively poking our heads out into a very different social media climate and very different climate generally to talk about Happy Birthday to Me many, many moons ago. So, yes, this is episode 323. And Erik, are you feeling...
324.
324. Oh, 324. Okay. So 324 we are doing today with Psycho 4 appropriately. So we were looking for a big one, and I know, well, I won't make any jokes about Erik looking for big ones because those kind of jokes write themselves.
We went from the first birthday, we went from 3 to 4 with Nathan.
Yes.
And we recorded it from 3 until 4.
Did we?
Possibly, no.
Possibly.
But I remember back then, of course, when we started recording, we were ending up with 3-hour shows, weren't we?
Yes.
God, how did we do that?
God knows. And how did you put up with those, dear listeners?
We can barely make an hour these days.
Well, it's all because it's jam-packed full of perfect criticism and humour, kind of. But I know some people have written in and said they've listened all the way through, all 300 plus episodes at least 3 times. So That's some dedication. But yes, we have a special show planned for you. So we are, we were trying to think what could we cover this time. And Psycho 4 perhaps hasn't got the impact of Psycho or Psycho 2 or even perhaps Psycho 3. But it is, of course, the third sequel to the granddaddy of all slasher movies, Psycho from 1960, and of course this was released on its 30th anniversary in 1990. So we thought, talking about anniversaries and birthdays, it would be a good one for us to cover. And of course, Olivia Hussey sadly passed away relatively recently, a couple of weeks ago. So whether or not she would have liked this to be her eulogy, as far as we're concerned, with her talking about pee-pee all the time, I don't know. But we will be talking all things Psycho 4. As we get into the show. But Erik, how are you doing being 14 years old?
How rude. I'm almost 51.
And Joseph, 14 years. Did you think we'd get to this point?
I didn't think we'd last 14 minutes, let alone years. How do we keep doing this? I don't know, but we keep doing it anyway.
I wonder if there's a list of longest running podcasts. I know we're not the longest running horror podcast, but it certainly must be up there, because I do see... I do follow quite a lot of podcasts, horror and otherwise, and especially a lot of the horror ones don't last. They kind of go in hot and heavy for the first few months and then sort of trail off. So it's amazing that we've managed to keep it up, as it were.
We have stamina.
And Nathan, are you surprised? 14 years of quality entertainment.
Yes, I am. And it was very much quality entertainment.
And it will be going forward as well.
Yeah.
Hopefully. So, well, obviously in time-honoured tradition, let's have a little chat about what we've been watching recently. So I don't know if you guys have had a chance to see anything. Erik?
No, the only thing I saw this week was I saw The Fall Guy with Ryan Gosling.
How was that?
I enjoyed it. It's a fun throwaway comedy action movie. It was perfectly fine. Not horror though, so that's all I've seen.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to see that because I really liked the original Fall Guy TV series. And I hear Lee Majors makes a cameo or an appearance of some sort.
Yeah, halfway through the end credits though, so stick with it.
Oh, okay.
And Heather Thomas was the...
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, she's in there as well. Yeah, in that same scene.
Cool.
I've seen it, but again, it's one of those action movies that it doesn't necessarily stick with you, does it?
I wouldn't say so, no, but I found it thoroughly entertaining for the 2 hours I was sitting watching it, though.
That's all you can ask for, though, isn't it, really?
Yep.
It's not something you're going to suddenly, walking down the street a month later and start chuckling to yourself about something funny that happened in it, because it is kind of just those kind of movies that you turn off your brain and watch it and be entertained for 2 hours.
Unlike my jokes of the week, which you'll find yourself walking down the street and then laughing when you think about them.
You mean being haunted by?
That's a bit rude.
So, well, thank you, Eric. Anything else?
No, that was it.
Okay, and Joseph, how about you?
Yeah, I had planned to I did cover an article on Godzilla for the next Fango flashback, so I finally forced myself to watch Godzilla -1 in full. I'd watched the opening sequence when it came out a year or two ago, but got distracted for whatever reason, and I really liked this a lot. The opening sequence in particular I felt was really strong, playing up more of the anticipation of Godzilla with all these ominous visuals, signaling his kind of, impending approach to this small Japanese island as its army base in 1945. And we never see him coming until he's there wreaking havoc, essentially. It's very effective. The movie, more or less, is kind of a loose retelling of the original Gojira film from 1954. In a lot of ways, it focuses on the original intent of the creature and how it relates to fears of essentially one country or another being blown to smithereens in times of war. So maybe appropriate for today. I don't know. There is some spectacle for those who prefer seeing Godzilla basically just kind of fuck shit up, but it's kind of sparse, and the movie sees fit instead to kind of focus more on the human introspection, which is something initially kind of diluted in the original run of films. So it's definitely a throwback to the intentions of the original film, and I enjoyed that. I probably won't watch it again anytime soon. The 2+ hour runtime is always a mood killer in my house, but I get and agree with most of the hype that surrounded this when it was released, and yeah, I recommend it overall. I mean, it's difficult, making a skyscraper-sized monster scary, especially since it's difficult keeping it in the shadows, but Godzilla -1 handles that task surprisingly well, so I really liked it, and that's all I've seen this week.
Cool. Well, Eric, did you see that?
Not yet, no, I heard it's good though.
And Nathan, is that do you like giant lizards trashing Tokyo, or is that not your thing?
I don't mind it, I just haven't seen it.
I think, this is the one you said, in the black and white one, set in the 40s after Hiroshima.
No, it's in color.
Well, no, I think they did do a version in black and white like they did with that Mad Max movie. Or with The Mist as well, they did that.
Okay, yeah. I think I did see the black and white version, that's what I was thinking. But I thought it was really well done. And also, I think it was kind of made for like a fraction of what a similar Hollywood blockbuster would cost. And the special effects, I think, kind of won awards.
Yeah, it looks great. I mean, whatever budget they had on it, it looks very high-end, like Hollywood style. So they did a really good job. Godzilla looks pretty terrifying. I mean, I'm so used to seeing a man in a rubber suit that a CGI creature that actually works was very, very shocking. So, yeah, good stuff.
Well, Eric's usually quite used to seeing a man in a rubber suit, aren't you, Eric?
How rude.
But that's one of the things I can never understand about, like, CGI. Obviously, it's got to the point now it's so good, but I don't really understand why some of these huge movies, special effects movies, cost so much money. You would have thought they'd save money doing it all on a computer.
Inefficiency, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. So, anything else, Joseph?
No, that was it for this week. Okay.
Nathan, how about you?
Yeah, I watched a couple of things. I watched a Spanish slasher. I can't pronounce the title, so I'm just going to give it my best shot here. Viaje Sangriento El Asesino del Equinocchio.
That sounds
like
spoken like a
Pinocchio.
local.
Yeah.
Local to what? I don't know.
You didn't look up the English title in the Internet Movie Database, Nathan?
No, but I mean, I just thought of it right when we got to this because I'd forgotten that I watched it. I was bored one night and I was skimming through Tubi and I saw it and I liked the mask on it, so I thought I'd give it a shot. There were no English subtitles, but it's kind of a by the numbers slasher movie, so I didn't really need them. I kind of could figure out what was going on just by watching. It's a pretty funny slasher movie in my opinion, because it's one of those slasher movies where typical like group of friends go to this remote location and start getting picked off by this killer who looks like he's wearing somebody's face. So I like the mask in it. It reminded me of Leatherface. But it's one of those films where once they all know that there's a homicidal maniac stalking them, they're not very urgent about getting away or anything like that. They seem kind of blasé about it. And there's this one scene that I thought was hysterically funny where the killer is cornering one of the girls and the guy comes up behind them and he grabs like some gravel off the ground. I'm talking like really small little rocks and throws them one at a time at the killer. And it's played like he's like trying to save his friend, but I'm like, these rocks aren't going to do anything. I mean, and it's got odd situations in it. Like there's one scene where the killer's cornering a guy and the guy steps in a bear trap and it's like, okay, he's probably done for. And then it cuts to another scene. And when it cuts back, the killer's gone and the guy's still laying there. So I'm like, okay, I don't know what happened, why the killer necessarily left him alive, because he does kill him later. So it's just a very odd, an odd thing. Oh, I just looked it up.
What year is this from?
2024.
Oh.
And I looked it up. I found it. It's called Bloody Trip, The Equinox Killer. That's the English title.
I've never heard of it, so a new one on me.
But yeah, I mean, it's okay. I'd probably do like a 5 out of 10 if I was going to rate it. So yeah. The other thing I watched, I finally caught up to The Substance. I was very confused by some of this. I know that you guys have seen it. When she takes this substance and splits into this younger version, it's not her mind in this younger version, right? It's almost like she's asleep for 7 days and just wakes up and sees what the other version has done.
That's what it feels like to me.
I think the intent was to have her share memories, but it doesn't feel like it in the movie.
No.
It really feels like two separate characters. And I kept thinking to myself, I like the movie, but I kept thinking to myself, what benefit does Demi Moore get out of this?
This is exactly the issue I had with the film as well. There's no, she gets no benefit from this substance. It's only, all she gets is misery from it, basically.
I think the original idea of the movie, and I could be wrong here, is that she's supposed to get that feeling, but because she stayed in that body for too long, she started losing that. And then the other one basically became its own person. I just don't think it's told very well.
Yeah, because, I mean, when I was watching it, I was like, it almost feels like, neither one really know what the other one's doing during their 7 days. So, because it doesn't feel like they share memories to me, because if they did, they would remember, okay, she left a huge mess that I got to clean up. But then it's like the younger one will wake up and see like the apartment completely like messed up and be shocked and angry about it. So I'm like, it's like she's just seeing it. So yeah, I would say that my biggest issue with The Substance is that I didn't quite understand why Demi Moore would even do this, because it'd be one thing if it was still her, just in a younger body, but it just doesn't feel like it is. It just feels like that, like a different person altogether is going to go live her life for 7 days. So I'm like, none of this benefits you whatsoever. Like none of it. Like you get nothing out of it except you're asleep for 7 days straight. Of course, that's not how it works out, because the younger version wants more and more time. I did like the body horror aspects of it, and I don't know if the intention was to be super campy in the end, but I was laughing like crazy at like the finale. It's so crazy and insane. And the scene where the whole audience is getting drenched in blood was just, I don't know, I just thought it was funny. But yeah, I like The Substance. I just feel like there's some issues in that I didn't understand certain parts of it.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I mean, even I didn't understand why it just felt like they couldn't connect those dots. It just felt like something was left on the cutting room floor. Although I will say a huge congratulations to Demi Moore. I think she just won the Golden Globe for Best Actress. And it's a horror film, so that's actually pretty good news.
And she was great in it. I thought she did an excellent job. I just feel like, I don't know. I mean, maybe the writing or something just needed some tweaks to, because I thought maybe it could be, maybe a better idea would have been that she's aware of everything going on, but like, it's like the younger version has taken the reins and all Demi Moore can do is kind of watch what she's doing with the body. I thought maybe it'd be something like that, but no, I mean, I didn't get that either. So it's definitely memorable.
Cool. Excellent. Well, I'm glad you called up with it. So that's good. Was there anything else?
No, that was all I've seen this time around.
Okay. Right. Well, thank you, Nathan. There's a couple of ones I've seen recently from last year, fairly new releases. One was Bloody Axe Wound, which is a kind of comedy horror movie by the director of Uncle Peckerhead, Matthew John Lawrence. And this one is kind of along the same lines, I kind of guess, as the what was it called? I've forgotten the name of it now. That's not going to help. The one with the guy who's the serial killer and the documentary crew go after, follow him around.
Behind the Mask.
Behind the Mask, the rise of Leslie Vernon. So this is kind of similar kind of idea to some degree, but it's set in this kind of almost like a comic book universe where nothing's really feels real necessarily. And this father and his adopted daughter run a video store, and never quite explicitly says it, but it's kind of probably late 80s or early 90s. And it's just kind of that tail end of the mom and pop kind of video stores. So it's on its way out, but he's the town slasher, basically. He's horribly disfigured, and he goes around killing teenagers with his daughter as his kind of protege. And then somehow somebody makes movies where Jeffrey Dean Morgan plays this killer in these videos, which they then rent out to the townsfolk from their video store. But he's getting a bit long in the tooth now, and his daughter's very, very keen on becoming his, basically taking over the mantle and becoming the town serial killer. But then she falls in love with high school students, where she's sent to recce for this kind of big, kind of sort of prom night style murder-thon at the high school. And she falls in love with one of the students, and then tries to protect her newfound friends from her killer father. So it's kind of it's a fun movie. I gave it 3.5 stars on Hysteria Lives, but it feels. I don't think it's as successful as the Rise and Fall of, the Leslie Vernon Behind the Mask movie. As a satire of slasher movies, but it's fun in itself. I've never seen Uncle Peckerhead, which apparently was about some a rock band it goes on tour with a demon or something along those lines. But from what I've heard, it's kind of very kind of similar kind of sort of approach. So, any of you guys seen that, or any interest in seeing that?
I'm aware of it. I mean, it's been posted about on the forums ad nauseum, but I haven't seen it.
I imagine out of all of us, Nathan would probably like it most.
Oh, cool. Then I'll have to seek it out.
Yeah. The other one I saw was I was sent a screener for, I think it's going to be out. Well, it's going to be out by the time this goes out, surely. I think it's released on the 20th of January. Is a movie called Bystanders, which is kind of a rape revenge slasher adjacent movie, directed by a woman called Mary Beth McAndrews, where it kind of turns the whole rape revenge thing slightly on its head, in so much that the rape is not shown. It's kind of you hear some of it, but you don't see it. So unlike something like I Spit on Your Grave or any kind of movie like that, there's no there's no titillation from the rape, which is something of a controversial thing. So it's really kind of short on rape and long on retribution. And although it's
there's something for the DVD cover. It's short on rape, but long on retribution. Justin Kurzweil.
Yes, well, hopefully they don't quote me on that. But because the whole point of the movie, I suppose, it's kind of a spoiler, but it's not a spoiler because it's in the trailer, it's in the synopsis. Is a young couple returning from a wedding, find one of these girls that's escaped from this kind of group of frat boys who's trying to hunt down these girls and kill them after they've raped them. And they kind of go to bat for them and then start going after the frat boys. So there's a few more twists and turns from there, but it's for an indie. It's an indie movie, kind of relatively low budget, but pretty well shot. It looks good. I had a few issues with it in so much that there were things I thought they possibly could have done better, and some of the characters make some kind of decisions which I thought were a little bit questionable. But it's kind of interesting thing where you do spend pretty much the whole movie basically chasing, attacking, and torturing these horrible frat boys, as opposed to many other kind of movies of its type. So it is kind of certainly interesting. So I put the reviews up on Hysteria Lives if you want to check that out. And the production company very kindly sent that to me. So yeah, it's an interesting feminist approach to feminist spin on that whole rape revenge thing. So definitely, again, another one I gave 3.5 stars to. So definitely worth a watch. But again, I know none of you have seen it because it's not out yet. But if you do fancy that, do check it out. I'm sure it'll be on all the usual places. So, I don't think there's anything else for us to talk about apart from going into our main feature, which of course is Psycho 4 from 1990. So I have a trailer here, which I will play, and then I'll bring us back in as my choice after this.
Matricide. Just like the first time. She deserves to die. This time it'll be with my own hands. Mine alone.
Norman!
A boy's best friend is his mother.
Norman Bates recalls his childhood with his abusive mother while fearing his unborn child will inherit his split personality disorder. So yes, that is the very expansive synopsis on IMDb for Psycho 4 from 1990. So this was a little bit, released on the 30th anniversary of Psycho of 1960. Obviously, it was a Showtime. It was a TV movie, although I hadn't seen it for a while. So when I watched it again recently, I was not shocked, but I was surprised to see some nudity in this. And of course, it was a cable, made for cable Showtime TV, which I presume I'm right in thinking.
It's Showtime.
Yes, well, exactly. So I presume is that why that was that she said it's Showtime in Friday 13th Part 5 because they would show boobs?
Oh, I don't know. I think she was just really excited to get her boobs out.
Okay. Well, you do see a couple of boobages in this. It's kind of. For me, this movie, I enjoy it. I mean, it's Mick Garris, I think it's very well made. I think trying to follow Hitchcock, he obviously is a tall order. I think the whole setup in this and the basic premise is that Norman Bates is out of the asylum where he's married his psychiatrist, which I'm sure there's some rules about that, who has just informed him that she is pregnant. And so it's his birthday. So while she's at work, he started slowly unraveling because he fears that his unborn son or daughter will inherit his psychosis. And he phones this chat show, which just happens to be on Matricide, so the murder of mothers. And another one of his old psychiatrists happens to be on the show. And the female DJ is talking about men who kill their mothers. So it's all very convenient. This all happens on the same night. But she talks him through his past. And so in a way, it's effectively set up. You've got this thing where it flashes back to Norman Bates at 18 years old or kind of a teenager, where he's played by Henry Thomas, and his mother is played by Olivia Hussey, which they do kind of make allowances for that, because obviously you just presume when you see Psycho, the original Psycho, that Mrs. Bates, Norman Bates, is this old lady, whereas Olivia Hussey was in her late 30s and is still very beautiful. And I think there's a line in this where Anthony Perkins, obviously also returning once again as Norman Bates, says that he viewed his mother when she was dead as an old woman for some reason, so they kind of get around it that way. So he talks to this DJ with the others listening on, including bizarrely director John Landis, who just is cameoing. I'm not even sure if he has any lines or very few lines, as a kind of technician in this radio station. And he kind of tells her that he's killed women before and he's going to kill again. So there's a bit of a race against time to try and find out who this person is. And Norman Bates calls himself Ed, which of course is presumably a kind of a nod to Ed Gein, who was the inspiration for the original Robert Bloch novel of Psycho. So Norman tells her how he killed his mother, and how he got this split personality, because Olivia Hussey, who I think is really good as Norma Bates, is kind of more outwardly batshit crazy than Norman Bates, that she goes from being this kind of loving, kind mother to this, kind of complete kind of crazy monster. Never better kind of typified by the scene where Norman Bates is shown as a small child at his father's funeral, and his mother tickles him, and then when he giggles she slaps him and tells him he has no respect. So this is something he kind of grows up with. So it's not psychologically particularly deep, but I think it kind of works pretty well. I mean, for me, I still think out of the sequels, Psycho 2 is probably my favourite, and it was a very clever movie, kind of not what you would have expected from a Psycho sequel in 1982. Psycho 3, it doesn't have the kind of gonzo weirdness of Psycho 3, the kind of sweaty gonzo weirdness of it. So it's kind of small screen origins show a little bit. I mean, it's got a very small body count compared to the other Psycho movies or Psycho sequels, certainly. But I enjoyed it. I mean, it's certainly not a clunker like many other sequels, although the kind of teased kind of son or daughter of Norman Bates never quite happened. And the movie kind of teases that at the end, which I'm sure we'll discuss kind of exactly what happens at the end of the movie. But Anthony Perkins died 2 years after making this. So they kind of essentially, outside of the Gus Van Sant remake and the Bates Motel sort of TV series, it kind of stopped this original run of Psycho movies after a 30-year run, belated run after the 1960 original. So yeah, it's not it's not a movie that I can go back to lots, but I kind of enjoy it. I don't think it's a classic. If I had to choose any, obviously Psycho is a classic movie. Psycho 2 for me would be the movie that I would return to probably most outside of the original. But I'm glad we're getting around to covering it finally. So Erik, what were your thoughts on Psycho for the beginning?
Yeah, much like yours, I think. I saw this back in the day, and actually my memories of it were it was kind of cheap and straight to video looking, but I was surprised rewatching it that it actually does look really, really good, and it's very well made. I'd forgotten how predominantly downbeat the film is, particularly the flashbacks to Norman's youth, where he's sort of sexually and verbally abused by his mother sort of every 10 seconds, it seems. So it certainly lacks the popcorn element of parts 2 and 3. Like you, I think part 2 is probably or 2 is the best sequel. I really enjoyed 3 as well. This one, whilst I think it's interesting, doesn't have the rewatchability factor of 2 and 3. It's definitely more of a character piece than those films. It has mystery elements. 2 and 3 had mystery elements and a slasher angle, which is it's totally missing from this one. This is more of as the title would suggest, an origin story. For me, origin stories of slashers are never terribly interesting because they always fall back on rather simplistic cliches like, he was mistreated by his mother, and that's or his father, and that's why he's a psycho. If you think think of Michael Myers in Rob Zombie's Halloween, and you think of Freddy and Freddy's Dead, and I'm sure there's others as well. We even in the Friday the 13th, it was in Freddy versus Jason, actually, I think we saw that Jason being bullied as a child at the summer camp and stuff like that. So it all goes back to what they call Psychology 101 in terms of these origin stories, and I just don't find that interesting. I think they get away with it more in Psycho 4 because unlike in Halloween, they completely demystify or try to Michael Myers, who's, in all the other films, he's this silent, faceless killer, and then all of a sudden we see him as a child, smiling and happy and talking and chatty, and I think it just takes away from the power of the movie. In Psycho, it's less of a problem, of course, because Norman Bates is a, quote, regular human being. It is an interesting film. I mean, Olivia Hussey is good as Norma, although some of her dialogue is deliciously silly, I suppose. There's a scene where she locks Norman in the closet and says, you're a girl, your thing is only good for making wee-wee, which, as you guys know, I've been quoting that all week on the private messages we send to each other, because I just think I'm almost 51 now, and I'm still incredibly childish. I'm the first to admit that. She's good with what she's given to do. There's no real nuance to Norma Bates. There is one scene early on where she's seen sort of being really kind and playful with Norman when he was a very young child. But then every other scene she's in, she's just horrible and nasty and schizophrenic. That one element I found really far-fetched was, you mentioned it, Justin, was the fact that Norman's married to a psychiatrist at the hospital he was incarcerated at. Regardless of the legalities of it, would you want to? I don't know. Would you fall in love with a killer? Maybe you could.
Well, especially considering that it's only been a few years since he killed all those people.
Yeah,
so
I know.
This is only 3 or 4 years after Psycho 3.
Yeah, it's a big risk. I'm surprised he's not in prison, to be honest. Also, one other thing I noticed about this film, which dates a kind of bit, is everyone was smoking in that radio studio. Just smoke everywhere. God, it must stink. And also, it must be difficult to breathe in there. I was thinking of the idea, I was wondering what it would be like if Jason or The Shape rang into a talk show. I don't think they'd have much to say, probably, about their origins. So, I enjoy the film. It's a very different type of sequel for the Psycho series. 2 and 3, as I said, we're kind of pushing towards an 80s slasher vibe, whereas this one is sort of pulling away from that. It's I like it, but it's not something I intend to revisit anytime soon.
Okay, well, thank you. Nathan, how about you?
I've always liked Psycho 4. I remember when I rented it way back in the day, I think around this time, 1990, slashers were kind of gone, I guess, for the most part. There was a few, but I kind of rented it not expecting much at all, and I really liked it. Definitely not what I would call a slasher movie, like 2 and 3 were. But, I think that, Henry Thomas and Olivia Hussey do really well in the roles that they're given. I think that Norman's mother is completely insane. I don't really blame him for killing her, to be honest, because when she starts dating Chet, and that's another thing, is every Chet in a movie a jerk?
I think so. Do you guys know anyone called Chet or Chuck or Bud? They're real American names, I find.
I don't.
No, I don't either.
But it was crazy to me because Chet's a bully. Like, he's bullying Norman, and Norman's mom is fine with it. They, she seems cool with it, and maybe even likes to see her son bullied.
Kind of reminds me of Justin Kurzweil.
Oh, Erik, give it a rest.
Oh, you give it a rest.
Celebrating our 14th birthday.
Yeah, but you bully me, and then Joseph and Nathan are like two Chets. They're just standing by watching you bully me.
Suck my Chet.
I think that we would be two Normas.
Two Normas, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's just so much weirdness between Norman and his mom. I'm like, really, it's really no wonder he's as messed up as he is, because, she's like completely off her rocker. She really needs to be in a mental asylum. Maybe Norman could have had a normal childhood if he was taken away from her. But yeah, in general, I really like the movie. I'm like Erik in that I've not always been really big on origin stories. Mainly just because I don't know. Usually the more you explain, the less scary a killer is, like I don't need to know, anything more about Jason. I don't need to know his childhood. Like what we need to know was said in Friday the 13th Part 1. That's all I need to know. And he's a ruthless killing machine. And that's what I like. But if I start getting all this, I mean, it's sort of like, Rob Zombie's Halloween remake in that he has to give Michael this backstory where, he's got this horrible home life and he just gets pushed into killing. And I'm like, again, it just takes the horror out of it for me, or the scares, I should say. I just, I don't know. I just don't find it that scary if I know more about them. But yeah, I mean, in general, to be in, origin story, I really enjoyed this one. I like, the cast. I like CCH Pounder. I loved her in The Shield. Thought she was really great there. So, it's always good to see her again.
Would you pound her?
Erik, that's uncouth.
That just came into my head.
I'm very unlikely.
I prefer that all of us on this show remain couth.
I'll do my best. Sorry, Nathan.
You were being inordinately rude, Erik.
Inordinately, yes. The word of the day.
But yeah, there's also her obsession with we that I wondered about Erik, like what his thoughts would be. Because, of course, I saw the quotes from the wee, but then, of course, she also brings up that, like, she has trouble, too, because of Norman when he was inside of her, which, yeah, I mean, she's right. I mean, it's totally Norman's fault. It's Norman's fault for everything. If it rains and storms one night, Norman did that.
Yeah, this is exactly the way Justin treats me.
Do you blame Erik for everything, Justin?
He does.
Well, that time, that reminds me a little bit of Psycho 4, because that time we met in Manchester and Erik was stood behind me and I felt something pushing into my back, and that's what reminded me of this movie.
My God.
Anyway, I enjoyed Psycho 4. Like you guys, I would probably say Part 2 is the most rewatchable one for me. But yeah, I would definitely rate 4 above average. So yeah, that's my Tupperware.
Excellent. Okay. Well, thank you very much. And Joseph, what are your thoughts on Psycho 4?
Yeah, I don't think Psycho 4 is as bad as its reputation seems to suggest. But I think the problem with it is that it's 2 movies struggling for airtime, and only one of those movies is interesting. I think the idea of Norman on the phone with a salacious talk show host is a great one. And even better that the host here turns out to be someone who shows real concern for whom she's speaking. And I would have been fine if they'd skipped the flashback stuff completely. I found both the acting and story progression during the radio segments particularly strong. No small but large thanks to, both Anthony Perkins and CCH Pounder, who create this kind of, it's like a riveting back and forth while never being in the same room with one another. When they flash back to his time as a teenager, I wasn't as involved. I mean, like you guys have said, we already know more than enough about Norman and his mother from the original film alone that this just feels like being beaten over the head with a newspaper, much like Norma does to Norman in this film, for no reason whatsoever. And as much as I, love both actors, Henry Thomas and especially Olivia Hussey, they're not bad here, but I don't think they were quite up to the task of playing these monumental characters. The mother character, I think, works best as that part of Norman that we only see when he snaps. Meeting her character in the flesh kind of seems at odds with the quote-unquote woman that we know from the original Psycho. And she's such an over-the-top character here in her abuse. I think Norman goes from a sympathetic figure to a sad sack real fast. And I've never really saw Norman as like a sad sack character. I saw him as kind of sympathetic. And I just don't find him sympathetic here. I just felt like he's just so put upon. I don't know. The slasher stuff, it's pretty much non-existent here. We get a few little moments of knife play and Norman in drag, but this feels more like a maudlin drama than it does a slasher film. And so I think for me, the only real thrills came into play during that back and forth at the radio station, when we're left wondering who Norman is going to kill. I mean, I think they could have easily ditched the flashback narrative and made this sort of a two-person showdown between the radio show host and Norman. Maybe making the Fran Ambrose character tangentially connected to Norman in some way, apart from the radio show, as maybe like a surprise twist or something. I don't know. But they abruptly dropped the radio format to kind of wrap up loose ends with the flashbacks and to give Norman a relatively happy ending by literally making him walk through fire to a happier place. And I don't know, it just doesn't really work all that well. I will say, though, I wasn't bored through the whole movie. There was a certain kind of familiarity with Norman, again, struggling with his demons that I guess offered some comfort of sorts. And, as I said, the stuff at the radio station is strong. And I also couldn't help but laugh at Norman's new wife. I mean, her character must be the most trusting and forgiving soul alive if she's going to marry and have his kid. But, ultimately, and kind of like Norman's psyche, I feel like this is too much, it's too fractured to be of any lasting interest. And I found it mostly kind of a weird send-off for such an iconic character. So, I hate to give this a thumbs down because, as I said, the radio show segment is great. And it's difficult not feeling a connection with Norman after so many years. So I'll just say on any given day, my thumb could tilt in either direction and leave it at that. Neither thumbs up nor down for me.
Okay, well, thank you. I think it's interesting. I mean, I agree with. Olivia Hussey, I think, is good in this, but it's her European style accent that doesn't kind of quite fit. And I think there is a little bit they're trying to retrofit her as this kind of slightly glamorous Norma Bates in with this idea of the old lady in the grey wig that we see in the original movie with the skeleton. And also the voice that Norman doesn't sound really anything like her, does it? So there is a little bit of a disconnect there, perhaps. That
he's not very good at impressions.
No, it's a bit Gottel gear, isn't it? Sort of like with a sort of ventriloquist dummy. So perhaps I'm not the Kathy Bates, but someone like a Kathy Bates or character, or somebody with like a southern drawl, or a slightly older lady, older character actress might have worked better in this role. Although I do appreciate the fact that I think she's pretty, she's good in what she does, and it's an interesting thing to see. The fact that Norman, obviously, the whole kind of weird incest angle is kind of played around with but never quite fully developed, and at one point Norman himself says that there wasn't, when it's suggested that it was incestuous, he said it wasn't, even though it's shown to be kind of certainly borderline anyway. It's kind of interesting, but I do wonder, with a different actress in the role of Norma Bates, it might have held together slightly better, perhaps, but nothing against Olivia Hussey. And obviously, Olivia Hussey is always going to be in our hearts as Jess in Black Christmas. And I know she was very keen to do this role because obviously, if you're as an actor or actress, you're given the opportunity to play someone as iconic as Norma Bates, then I imagine it's definitely something you want to get your teeth into. But talking of background, shall we have a chat? Nathan, have you got anything you want to tell us?
No.
Okay, well, thank you. I'll wrap that up quickly. Joseph, how about you?
Yeah, just a few tidbits. Apparently, Henry Thomas accidentally stabbed himself during the scene where he kills the young girl who has the hots for him. It led to significant nerve damage, and I think he never got the scar, cosmetically altered, so he still has that scar on his hand till this day. The original pitch for Psycho 4, and this sounds great, was more of a black comedy about the Bates Motel being turned into a haunted tourist attraction. And basically Norman is hired to play himself after the actor falls ill or something similar to that. I thought that sounded pretty good, but they nixed that idea. This was shot in Orlando, Florida on the backlot of Universal Studios, and apparently during operation hours, so a lot of the park patrons got to see certain scenes being filmed. The sets, I think they became an attraction at the park, but they were bulldozed in the late 90s to make way for Woody Woodpecker's Kid Zone area. Poor Norman. And I'd be remiss if I didn't re-mention CCH Pounder, as Nathan had mentioned her in The Shield, which is the greatest TV drama ever made, in my opinion. She played Claudette Wims from 2002 to 2008 during its entire run. So that's where I best remember her from. But that's all the background I have.
Cool. Okay. Well, thank you, Joseph. Erik, how about you?
Just that it debuted on Showtime on the 10th of November in 1990, and it was filmed between June the 4th and July the 1st, 1990. So it was at 5 months, would that be 4 months, 3 months of pre-production, or post-production even. It was written by Joseph Stefano, who wrote the original Psycho screenplay in 1960, and who apparently hated Psycho 2 and 3. He had toyed with the idea of adding prequel elements to the original script for Psycho for Alfred Hitchcock, but eventually they were discarded, but he did recycle some of them for his 1990 version of Psycho 4. Showtime were desperate to keep the end of the film a secret, although, I don't know, there's not anything really surprising happens at the end, to be honest. So they mentioned that they'd planned on shooting multiple endings to avoid, the end of the film being, got out into the public. Although I'm not sure how much of a concern they would have had in the pre-internet days. Yes, as you said, Justin, earlier, Showtime had no rating system. It was cable TV, which allowed Mick Garris to get away with a bit more than you would if you were on Hallmark or something. So that's why there's these very perverse sexual elements to the story that I was, kind of taken aback by when I was watching it this week. And also I suppose there's a bit of gore. You see a bit of blood in this film, which definitely probably you wouldn't have if it was made for a mainstream channel, I suppose.
No, it's interesting. I mean, I think apparently some of the stuff I saw was that this is only the second cable movie that was trailered in cinemas. So apparently, Showtime paid. It cost $4 million to make, and apparently a lot of that went to Anthony Perkins. And it cost about as much, again, about $4 million to promote it, and a lot of that went to cinema advertising for the movie. So it was a big deal, and they showed the original Psycho for the first time ever uncut on American television without any ad breaks on Showtime after this. And they got Janet Leigh in, who of course played Marion Crane in the original Psycho, to bookend the showing of Psycho 4 and the showing of Psycho afterwards. And I think she apparently said that, I read that too about the multiple endings. Apparently there was never any multiple endings, but it was something that they said just to make it sound a bit more interesting. A few other things. Tom Schuster, who plays Chet, there's an interview with Olivia Hussey in one of the newspapers when the movie came out, or just on the just before it came out, and she was talking about how making made-for-TV movies differed shot for theatrical, higher budgeted movies, and she says that you don't, to quote, she said, you don't have the luxury of a long shoot of saying hello and getting to know each other. And she said that she met Tom Schuster, shook his hand, and 5 minutes later they were naked in bed. So that was quite funny. Talking about Anthony Perkins, apparently he said that number 2 had been too ordinary for some reason, and
number 2
and number 3 was too much like the original, even though he directed it. Apparently Mick Garris said that Anthony Perkins was the most difficult actor he ever worked with. Perkins was diagnosed with HIV on the set of this movie, which probably had something to do with it, and sadly passed away a couple of years after this came out. Apparently he was although he said when he actually saw the movie that it was his favourite after the original. The Orlando, some of the local newspapers in Florida, where this was, who said it was made, reported that he skipped the wrap party and was in very ill humour after the film's final all-night shoots, which is obviously the climactic shoots in the Bates house, where the kind of fiery climax happens. What else was there? Originally, this was going to be straight to video. That was the original idea before it was commissioned by Showtime, and it had been in gestation since 1988, and very possibly I've read that synopsis of that other idea for the movie that didn't go ahead. There was apparently a 900 number trivia contest where people could phone in, and the grand prize was going to a trip to Universal Studios Florida. I've been to Universal Studios in Los Angeles, and I saw the Bates Motel and the house there. And of course, this was recreated. It was all recreated on the sound lot of the. I think it was new at the time. Universal Studios Orlando. What else is there? Janet Leigh visited the set. She and as I mentioned, she kind of bookended the showing of the movie. Mick Garris said of the film, he said it might be frightening and even disturbing, but it will work on deeper levels than the average slice 'em and dice 'em flick. He said he originally turned down the offer of directing because he already had directed films like Fly 2 and Critters 2. And
he didn't direct Fly 2.
Did he not? Oh no, he didn't did he? No, that's Chris Wallace, was it?
Chris Wallace, yeah. He did have something to do with it, though. He was maybe wrote it.
Well, maybe that's what they meant. He was so he was involved with that. His wife was in this. She was with the blonde hair in the studio in the radio studio.
Oh yeah,
she was the assistant. Henry Thomas was 18 when he filmed this, and he said he asked Anthony Perkins advice about playing Norman Bates, and Anthony Perkins, perhaps arguably unhelpfully, said, my only advice would be ask yourself, what would Norman do? Or would Norman do that? And considering Norman Bates is somebody who chopped up ladies with a butcher's knife, then I'm not sure how helpful that was necessarily. Olivia Hussey was 39 years old when she made this. She said it was, for her, she found it quite difficult playing opposite Henry Thomas because he was the same age as her son. And she said every time she screamed at him or slapped him for the role, she would apologise. And she found that sort of very difficult. Schuster, who played Chet in it, said that he had a special connection to Psycho because he said when the original came out, he and his friends went to see a Jerry Lewis movie when they were 6 years old. And when it started, they were accidentally being ushered in to see Psycho instead. So I imagine that was quite a formative experience. So a couple of just quick things from some newspapers at the time, which weren't particularly complimentary. Janet L. Martineau in the Saginaw News noted that both Olivia Hussey and, of course, Thomas had grown up from child stars into playing more these monstrous roles in the sequel, and obviously with Olivia Hussey in Romeo and Juliet, and Henry Thomas in E.T. She said that Olivia Hussey beautifully underplays a role as the lusty mother who hugs and cuddles one second and flies into a psychosexual rage the next.
Underplays.
Well, that's what she said. She also said called Thomas's performance as uncanny, and noted Psycho was a theatrical movie made by a television crew from the Hitchcock series, where Psycho 4 is a made-for-TV movie made by a crew with theatrical movie credits. The John Carman in San Francisco Examiner said it went the other way. He said Thomas is wide-eyed and unaffecting as a young Norman, and Hussey is oddly amusing in a mommy dearest sort of way. So he kind of obviously, I thought she was channeling Faye Dunaway as Joan Crawford in Mommy Dearest. And the last bit was Tom Shells in the Knoxville News Sentinel gave it a bad review, saying, I was seized with an uncontrollable urge to kill, but so may you if you watch Psycho 4. Of course, murder would be too severe punishment for the impudent muttonheads who made this moronic travesty. Yes, so mixed reviews for when it got released. So what was the consensus on the groups, Joseph?
Well, with the move over to Blue Sky, I figured this might happen. We only had 7 comments for Psycho 4, the beginning, but hopefully it'll pick back up soon. Of those 7, here's the top 3. Nerdy Nuisance writes, I kinda half like it. One of those movies I'm not pushed on either way, but to be frank, I'm having a hard time even remembering much of it. And wow, 14 years, guys, congrats. That's a whole lot of slasher trash with panache, and I've loved every second. Thank you, nerdy nuisance. Robert Freeze? Okay, I froze. He says, great cast. Joe Stefano always took credit for creating Norman Bates. Robert Bloch did. Universal downplayed Bloch's novel, so he wrote his own sequel. Perkins and writer Charles Edward Pogue had a follow-up to 3 that Universal killed. Director Perkins would have given Norman a better send-off. And Cropsey comes back from the dead with, really enjoyed it. Olivia Hussey is great in it, and it's nice to get a happy ending for Norman, though it's more of a what-if film for me because I love the timeline of the first 3 so much. Follow us on Blue Sky at THC-podcast, listen on Patreon and YouTube to help support the show, or listen wherever you catch your pods. Write to the show via the Hysteria Continues at gmail.com with movie-related and general feedback and questions, or shipping info on Eric's life-size Bob Hoskins standee. He's still waiting on that in the mail. If all of that sounds like too much to remember, just Google us. Over to you, Justin.
Okay, well, I guess, Eric, have you got a very special birthday edition joke of the week for us?
It's always special. Every week.
Certainly is special.
It's my joke of the week. It's so great and fantastic.
How do you trap a psycho? You use Norman Bate. Norman Bate.
I liked it.
Did you have a backup?
Thank you. I was attacked by the sidewalk just now. It was dressed as an old lady and was wielding a big knife. It turns out it was a psychopath.
I quite like that one. Well done, Eric.
You got complimented from Justin. Oh my God.
I know. Well, it's a birthday.
Happy birthday indeed.
Sharing the love. So, what else is there to say apart from what we're covering?
We have some feedback.
Oh, we have some feedback, of course. We have birthday feedback. So who would like to go first?
Okay, so Rob Freeze again has sent us in an email. Now, Rob, forgive us, we've had to edit it down. You gave us some great background info on The House by the Cemetery, but we don't have time to read it all. But he says, hey guys, while I've read reviews on your website as well as Justin's excellent book on the subject of slashers and listened to a number of your commentaries, I am only now beginning to listen to your podcast. One episode I recently listened to was episode 286, The House by the Cemetery. This is a movie I've loved since first watching the Vestron VHS back in the mid-80s. During the discussion, many questions arose, and I'd like to offer what I know about it in the hopes of answering some of those questions. I've been lucky to have interviewed Italian screenwriter Dardano Sacchetti extensively, as well as his writing partner and wife, Eliza Briganti. Sadly, Eliza passed away on the 13th of January of this year, so that's last week. That's earlier this week, actually. Here are some of Sachetti's comments about House. Oh, actually, I'm sorry, she probably passed away in 2024, I'm guessing, because this was sent before Christmas. So here are some of Sachetti's comments about House by the Cemetery. He said, plot anarchy mattered more to Fulci because it allowed for scenes that the public liked. As a consequence, Fulci no longer asked for plausibility of stories, but just wanted more blood, more gore. The films produced by De Angelis were often soups with strange ingredients. To satisfy all markets, he was willing to do anything and made seemingly odd choices. For example, the Germans wanted zombies, so they had to be in there, even if only for one scene. Americans loved ghosts or the supernatural, and this also had to be in there. And the Japanese loved sexual sadomasochism, and that too had to be included. The story eventually became a sort of Christmas tree that had many colourful and often very different balls. You noted that there was friction between Sacchetti and Fulci, and there was. It started years earlier when Sacchetti had been hired to actually work directly with Fulci to write The Psychic. Sacchetti told me that it was one of the worst experiences in his entire life, not just his career. They did not get along, and Fulci treated him like he was a punk. Sacchetti said Fulci wasted so much time trying to find the inspiration to start writing that he just went back to his hotel room frustrated and knocked out the script overnight, delivered it the next morning and went home, and the movie turned out to be exactly what he wrote. Since the zombie flesh eater script was credited only to Eliza for various reasons, Fulci had no idea that he signed on when he signed on, that it was written by Sacchetti. Sacchetti never appreciated anyone tinkering with his scripts, and there's some resentment that fans credit Fulci totally for the films, never considering the writer. But as stated above, they did mend their relationship, and Sacchetti wrote The Mummy for Fulci at the end of his career. They actually had an agent take it around Hollywood in the mid-90s, although no one was interested. Oddly enough, Universal released The Mummy with Brendan Fraser in 1999, but I'm sure that's a coincidence, right? A lot of info, but hopefully it helps fill in some of the blanks. I wish you all a wonderful Christmas and a prosperous new year. Best, Rob Fries. Thank you, Rob. I kind of butchered your email there. I've slipped over some of it and I had to edit chunks out, but I hope you don't mind. But thank you for your information on House by the Cemetery.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And also Bob wrote a fantastic email to me about Dark Knight of the Scarecrow and some of the he interviewed the writer of that. So and I shared that with Amanda, and she was thrilled to hear it. So thank you, Bob. Bob. That's because I'm thinking about the dreamy Bob Hoskins. That's what it is.
You are. He's so dreamy.
Yes.
He's just complimenting you left and right today, Eric. What's going on?
I know. Maybe I'm buttering him up for something.
So what, like Marlon Brando does in Last Tango in Paris?
What, Last Tango? What do you mean with you? It would be like sticking a kind of pop up your ass, wouldn't it? As a tango, as it were. But do we have any more bits of feedback?
I have a really, really, really short one here. It's
I'm sure you
actually
do.
About
oh dear, the same old jokes.
Mm-hmm. This one's actually a small review on the naughty list of Mr. Scrooge. It's from Glenn Smith, and he says, the naughty list of Mr. Scrooge is surprisingly decent. It sounds like one of those Winnie the Pooh type things that's out recently. It's actually a quote-unquote misdeed in the past is punished in the present by a killer in a mask slasher film. Fairly well acted, stylishly shot, and well worth a look. That's from Glenn Smith. Thank you, Glenn. We would agree. Oh, and he also says congratulations on 14 years.
Excellent. Well, thank you. And thank you for all the well wishes that we've had, both privately and otherwise. So, yes. So
I have another one here.
Okay.
From Andreas. And again, I've chopped out a little bit of this. He says, hello, good gentlemen. And Andreas is then giving us some suggestions or some ideas of future films to cover, possibly, or some films he's been watching recently. Headless, a strange one with a killer who... I like this. A strange one with a killer who knobs the decapitated heads of his victims while sporting a very cool skull mask. Have you heard of Headless? It sounds like something you'd like, Justin.
No,
I've seen it.
It sounds like something I would like. It sounds more like something
the
you would
killer
like.
knobs decapitated heads.
Well, you like the dead fat old men, so...
That's neither here nor there. It has some obscenely gory kills, one which caused me to turn away from the screen. And you could potentially do a double-barreled episode with Found from 2012, which Headless was born from, being an 80s throwback slasher set within the universe of Found. I would argue Found was the far better film, but isn't really a slasher film. I haven't heard of either of those. But the next
I've seen them both.
Oh, have you?
Yeah, they're kind of like the Terrifier films, like pre-Terrifier. They're great on gore, and there's some intrigue, but they go on far too long.
Another film that Andreas mentions, I think you've mentioned before as well, is Gutter Balls from 2008. It features pretty obnoxious and shrill characters, so you guys will love it.
I couldn't start. I hated Gutter Balls.
I did too. I can't stand that movie.
What about these films that are coming out involving Silver Age legacy characters such as Winnie the Pooh and Mickey Mouse? The characters have finally entered the public domain after a long period of time, with even more characters such as Superman set to enter the public domain soon. So what do we think of... I haven't seen Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey myself, or its sequel. Has anyone seen it?
It's okay.
Yeah, I'm not rushing out to see them. Although I know it wasn't, but what were the ones where the animatronic things come to life? The Banana Splits, that's the one I was thinking of. That was okay. But again, that wasn't a case of them coming into the public domain. It was, I think, licensed or something. But the reviews for the Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey films would put me off seeing them. On another note, it's great to see a Dark Knight of the Scarecrow Blu-ray coming from 88 Films with a commentary from you boys, no less. And Amanda Reyes is with us on that track. And P.S. we must get a sober commentary from you guys for The Night Before Easter. I'd love to hear Joseph talk about that classic in depth.
I'll tell you what. Go buy one of the 100 DVDs that I made. There's a commentary on there, and that's all you're going to get from me.
Is there?
Yes.
Oh, didn't know that. With
Nathan. Is it a double-ender?
Yep, we both on there.
How many copies you got left?
I don't have any of them anymore. I know I gave a few of them away to some of the cast. I'm sure they still have them, and I could probably get one if I wanted, but I'm in no hurry.
I still have one of them.
Well, wasn't the 10th anniversary was last year, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, we missed a trick there.
We didn't miss anything, Justin.
Well, I both me and Erik cameo in that movie, don't we?
We do, yes.
Mm.
Y'all have parts.
Certainly do.
If you know what I mean.
So, right. Well, thank you everyone who wrote in. We're just about to record another Fango flashback. And this time, talking of birthdays and anniversaries, we're actually going to take a look back at Fango number 1 before it became the Fango that we all know and love, where it kind of dealt with some sci-fi as well as some horror. But I think that'll be a fun one to look back at.
And fairies.
And fairies, yes. That's true. Some fairy art. And so what are we covering next time?
It's Eric's choice.
Oh.
He hasn't picked one.
Oh, Erik. It's supposed to be the big finish, the happy finish.
I know.
You can't even pull that off.
What about Hello, Mary Lou, Prom Night 2?
Okay. Is that... I haven't seen that for so long. Is that a slasher movie?
I would argue it kind of is in a way. It's close enough for us.
Okay. Well, I look forward to seeing it. I haven't seen it since I saw it on video back in the 80s, but I remember being a bit disappointed it wasn't really a sequel to Prom Night, but in any real sense. But yeah, no, I shall look forward to that. So thank you, Erik. And either, Joseph, obviously you can edit out Erik fumbling around and the dead air, or just leave it in.
No, I'll leave it in there.
Cool. So, we're going to play out with, I was trying to think of I think we've used Talking Heads Psycho Killer before, I'm sure. So I'll just go with something like, I will go for Where Is My Mind by the Pixies as a kind of psycho-adjacent kind of song. So, okay. Well, thank you for listening to The Hysteria Continues, and thank you for sticking around. Some of you for 14 years, some of you for less. But do delve back into the back catalogue. We're up to 324 or whatever it is episodes now. And I think also always when I look at podcasts and I sort of see if they've been going that long, I always feel a little bit, thinking, God, that's so much to catch up on. It's a bit like when I started The Real Housewives of New York. And you think, my God, how can I get through so much quality entertainment and catch up? But you do eventually. And also, of course, everything is so episodic. We cover one film at a time. So do delve back in. But we hopefully got plenty more coming your way. So, we're back off to Canada for Prom Night 2. Hello, Mary Lou, next pick. And we'll catch you next time on Hysteria Continues. So say goodbye to the good people.
Bye.
Goodbye.
So long.
Bye.
Where is